Probably about 25 minutes ago.
Okay. Oops. I think I got one, right?
So Carrie, did we send the right link to Carol then?
Yeah, she got this Carol worked on.
Jim, you want me to turn your mic on? Okay, hit the button.
Thank you.
Push it. There you go. Ryan, you want yours on too? You want your mic on or your background?
Yeah, Mary Lynn is here. Good for her.
Hello. As usual. Can you all get set up to do this?
I already got it going.
Okay.
You won't have to run anything. I'll turn your mic on once you hit the button. Right, Scott, she can run the meeting, right?
From here?
From her desk.
Perfect. All righty.
Mary Lynn, when you have time, there's a stack of F&P documents there.
I'm sorry?
When you have time, there's a pile of F&P documents to be signed.
Oh, okay, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Can we get our folks who are remote on the screen by any chance? All right. Let's see. We have Roberta Felicki-Pineski, Trey Mitchell, Marcus Savaglio. Here in the council chambers with me, Alderman Jim Boren, Todd Wolf, Ryan Sorensen. Right. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. All right, let's just go into the substance of our meeting today, and I'll turn it over to Administrator Wolf.
Thank you, Chair. we're going to be kind of giving a little bit of an explanation and discussion for, just for, you know, clarity of how our, with some examples on the GO borrowing. So if we can pull up our slide deck. All right, thank you. So go to the next one. Okay, thank you, Scott. So what we did was we put together some slides to help everybody follow along and with some explanation. So why the general obligation GO debt funding? As you can see in the slide, it says, you know, maintaining stability for payments while planning for future debt. Other financing sources of revenue not increasing. This is a huge concern that I have. And then obviously with our tax levy revenues allocated to GO debt, minimal increases are anticipated. So as an example, during our budgeting season, we could have increased our overall tax our levy by 26 cents. We went in at 15 cents. But we have to understand that when we don't increase, that's going to have an effect not just on operations, but also on debt services. So one of the things that I want to also point out is that in the models that you're going to see, we're keeping the lines flat. So again, it's a model. We put dozens of models together looking at all kinds of different options. So as an example, you can see a 30-year mortgage, and I've got 30 little houses, so each house represents a year. Next. So in our example here, after 3 years, in the example, you decide that you want to refund and for a better interest rate. Next. So this extends the loan out to help with annual payments. Again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to flatten our payments because year over year we've taken out quite a bit of debt in the past 4 to 5 years. We need to make sure that we can afford these payments as we move forward. So by refunding and then extending it out 3 years, we have done this many times, mainly due to our GO bonding being 10 years as a cap. And if you think about it, 10 years capped, and then you borrow loan year after year, this is kind of stacking the debt. So all of a sudden, your debt payments continue to increase. Next. Okay, so there's a lot of numbers here, and I want you to remember that this is the example that I presented to Finance and Personnel, and it's showing you that with no refunding, we're with a $4 million for anticipated or proposed future debt. I wanted to make sure that the team understood that this is going to be a problem for our future. Next. Okay, so if you look at please look at the blue box. That's the area that I want you guys to really focus on. As I tried to explain, the concern was to show the committee that $4 million, as we've done $4 million plus in the past years, can no longer be sustained. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this into a graph to help everybody understand. Next. So as you can see, this is the no refunding with an anticipated or proposed future debt of $4 million year over year. So again, no refunding. So the blue line is the future possible bonding with no refunding. The black line is the debt levy. This will increase year over year incrementally, but again, we're talking, you know, a couple $100,000 per year depending on tax levy. So please see that that we are over the line quite a bit. Next. The purple line is what I refer to as the debt ceiling. Again, when we look at our debt, we have our levy, what we budgeted for, and then we have what I call the debt ceiling. And in 2021, the budget was set to allow for these two lines. Next. So the dashed line is a more realistic estimation of our other revenue sources with our present state. So basically what we want to do is we want to stay below the purple line, and even if we could, I'd like to see us stay below the dashed line, if you follow me so far. Next. So again, with showing you guys a lot of numbers, this is with the refunding. Please look at the right column. Next. You'll see in orange, in the orange box, a lot of the numbers, but note the decrease. See our next slide. Next. So as you can see, putting them back to back, you can see the no refunding, the refunding, and again, what we're doing is we're pulling down the orange columns to actually be underneath that purple line. But you can see that in this model, the last 4 years, we are over the purple line. Next. So our next model was basically after our finance and personnel meeting, and things didn't go quite the way I was hoping. I basically did additional models with Carol Worth to say, okay, let's look at $2 million of geo-bonding for the next model. So this model is refunding, as I recommend, with a model of $2 million. This is done not to mean that we have to reduce our spending, as this will cause great problems, because we don't want to go back to not spending money to take care of roads and facilities and things. But it means that we need to look at our funding process and our strategic plan better. And we need to be focusing, like I do, not just on today, this year, but also how is the spending and the bonding going to be in the years to come? What projects do we have coming up, and how can we fund it, maybe using some other sources? So please take a look at the right column. Next. So in this column, in the green box, you can see the significant improvement, but let's put it in our graph to help everybody out. So, just to recap, obviously the blue is no refunding with a $4 million proposed if we were to stay on target with the spending that we've done in the last couple of years. If we look at the orange with refunding, still at the $4 million, we're closer to the bar, to the ceiling as I call it, but our last 4 years, again, are above the bar. The green, again with refunding, because I still recommend that we need to refund it, but with a proposed $2 million with additional funding options and a strategic approach as I take moving forward. Please understand that I am not focusing on just today's borrowing and projects, but the future years. Again, that's why I'm throwing these models out there. So I apologize in the confusion, but planning to adopt what we can afford is what I really need to bring to you guys. So as you can see, the green, by looking at a much more realistic borrowing for the future and a strategic plan, keeps us below our proposed ceiling and within guidance of what our levy is and what the ceiling is for future years. Thank you.
All right, we'll let Todd work his way back and then open it up for questions. I'm just going to start the questioning by asking, so Todd, is your suggestion or recommendation going to be that we, for capital improvements, we borrow about $2 million a year?
Chair, what I'm recommending is that our capital improvements group needs to look at more of a strategic plan when we're actually putting things together. There are some facilities and projects that we know are going to be much higher in cost because they haven't been taken care of for many years. But what we're looking at is we need to look at a balance between our general fund, and that continues to go up. Right now, it's estimated our general fund is going to go up another $1.8 million. So as an example, we need to come up with a balance between using some of that money for some of these one-off projects and not borrowing so much. So as an example, Chair, we tend to bank more money, meaning putting it into our general fund, and we're borrowing money that we have in our mattress as an example. So I'm saying that we need to put together a strategic plan and a balance between our other funding sources and our geo bonding. It also means that, you know, we've had some very large projects recently, all of which were needed, but we need to have an understanding of where we're going in the future and what that bonding will look like, as well as being more strategic on how we're doing our operations. So we have other projects that are in the works, as we all know, that will help us to reduce some of our borrowing, kind of like our smaller vehicles going to a fleet management program. That's going to take several $100,000s of borrowing out every year, year over year. So instead of borrowing for those vehicles on a 10-year note and extending it, that's going to help us put more of that money to reducing our borrowing and or putting it to other projects. Does that answer your question?
Sounds good. Questions? Alder Boren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Todd, when the Capital Improvements Commission meets, are they going to be going into it assuming that we're going to borrow $2 million? They got a whole list of projects, but then are you going to also infer that some of the projects that don't make the $2 million cut, are you going to give them an idea of how much maybe could come out of the fund balance? Or how will that work?
What we're planning on doing right now is I've asked the department heads to take a look at their projects that they have, and we need to prioritize them and put them into a true strategic plan as far as importance and what the ramifications are of those projects being pushed off. As we all know that there have been projects year over year where we've, basically stated, we kicked the can down the road. We can't continue to do that, so we need to prioritize those projects and look at them. So as an example, we know that Station 3, which is our headquarters, has not had the appropriate funding for years. That building is 50 years old, and in our capital improvements, we've put upwards of $1 million over 3 years. $300,000 over 3 years isn't addressing the true problem with that facility. So what we're looking to do is put that as a project, a strategic plan, so that as like a TID retires, we'll have an influx of increase in revenues, then we can balance that borrowing with the increase in revenues from a closure of a TID as an example. Does that answer your question?
It helps, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there questions from our virtual audience? Members?
Hi, yes.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Thank you. Todd, if we're planning to spend $136,000 in today's dollars so we can keep the curve the right way, but we already have the money in our mattress, why don't we just pay off the loans in such a way that we don't end up spending extra money in interest down the line?
That's a good question. Part of the problem is that you can't just take the money out of the mattress. Obviously there's ordinances and processes that we as a city would have to put together and get approved. The concept of the refunding is basically a process that we have done as a community and communities all over the United States and in Wisconsin. It's a typical process where when you have a geo bond, the geo bonds only have a 10-year lifespan. So what happens is you typically roll some of that over into the additional borrowing. So you're just, as I had showed you in the houses, you're just kind of extending that. In the example of the 30 houses, you're taking a 30-year loan and you're just extending it 3 by refunding. So it's spreading the payment out a little bit further. If the committee would remember or kind of remember back when we did our NANs to a geo debt, that was typically just like a refunding. We took out a 3-year NAN and then we rolled it into a geo but then we took it out even further than 10 years because of the South Point enterprise. So it is a typical process. None of us want to spend money to save money, but in the big picture of the refunding, it's actually small dollars when you look at the interest rates at this time.
Other questions, comments?
Todd,
Mary.
Oh, Jim, go ahead.
thank you, Madam Chair. Todd, do you know what the interest rates are on these notes right now that we're refunding?
Actually, they have been climbing. The market, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the market has been very erratic lately. So the numbers that we originally proposed obviously have changed, and they'll probably change until we actually close the bond. I do have Carol Worth online. If Carol wants to tell us what she's seeing in the market today.
If she could just answer what the current bonds that we have, what are the rates right now that, you know, the notes that we're going to be refunding, what is the rate right now? And with the way the market is right now, what's the current difference?
Carol, are you on?
I'm here.
Carol, can you
Okay.
answer Warren's question?
Yes, in terms of the notes that we're refunding, the 2015 notes are outstanding at rates from 2% to 2.125%. 2016 notes are outstanding at 155 and 165. And the 2017 notes are outstanding at 2.5%, both maturities at 2.5%. The last report that I gave to the council back on February 22nd, the true interest rate that we were estimating on the refunding bonds was around 142. Now the market has moved. As of last week, there was quite a sell-off of municipals, and that sell-off included as much as 30 basis points movement. So that could be up to about a 1.7 at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
All right, so just to summarize, and I think because I spent some time after our quite long meeting last week, the advance refunding is a typical municipal tool to refund obligations in a way that is beneficial to the municipality. So what we're doing at this point is we are extending the debt, but by extending it, we are leveling out the payments. And again, if you think of your own house, if you had borrowed money to make repairs that were needed for your house, but the payments became just too high, the possibility of refunding or refinancing and moving the debt out a little ways, yes, there is an extended period of debt, in this case not very long, but it has the advantage of fixing Todd's colorful bar lines and putting the city on a better financial platform. This also has, I think this process has been helpful to us in the sense of really looking concretely at how much we have to do in order to keep our house in order and how much it's going to cost and the best way of doing it. So overall, I am glad that we've had this extra meeting to clarify and condense and bring some conviction to the fact that the Finance Committee can recommend this to the council as a whole. This is a notice for discussion only, so there isn't any additional votes that we need to take at this point. But if anybody on the committee has any other questions or comments, now is the time.
I've got one final question.
Okay.
To stay with the home sale or home purchase analogy, can I just get a slightly more detailed explanation of why we can't do a cash-in refi to just make ourselves so we're not at a loss?
or she has to have cash.
I guess Marcus, I guess I need a little bit more clarity, but I'm assuming what you mean by that is take like general fund dollars and just transfer it and pay the debt off? Is that what you're referencing?
Well, so yeah, so I'm seeing here we've got in the real dollars or today's dollars of about 136,000 that we'll be expending over what we would do if we just paid off the debt on the normal schedule. How do we just borrow slightly less and pay off the lenders the difference?
It's not as easy as just doing that, because the money that's in our general fund also is reviewed by our Moody's and our credit rating. And we would actually have to go through several steps as a city and as a council to set the stage. Basically having council approve that funds can be used for different projects and or funding needs. We also have to be very careful on how general fund money is spent and allocated, because that's typically looked at as a bad thing. So and I'll give an example. When we remodeled City Hall, we were looking at spending $10.5 million just on City Hall for the remodel. What we, the city, did is we used $5 million from our general fund, because our general fund is significantly high compared to other communities. But we had to specify over time that we were taking that $5 million and that we were using it specifically for a one-time project, City Hall remodel, and that obviously funds would continue to go in to basically pay ourselves back. We did pay ourselves back very quickly because, as I was saying, right now we have an overflow that from budget year to budget year that goes into general fund. Those dollars over time will continue to reduce as we get better clarity to where our budgets should be. And as we all know, with operations costs continue to increase year over year with the cost of living and construction costs going up year over year, ultimately the two lines will cross. So we have to be very careful. We don't want to spend down our general fund too much, because that is our rainy day cushion, but there is enough in there that we could use for some specific projects. Please note that the Wasmer building, we did borrowed out 1.4 million out of our general fund. So that's 1.4 million IOU that the Wasmer building will be paying us back in 2 to 3 years. So again, when we look at the number, that's an obligation that goes against our general fund that we, the city, are not using for ourselves. I hope that answers your question.
And when Todd talks about the general fund, at least as I understand it, would be our general fund reserve,
Yep.
Which continues to grow. And part of that is just, it's kind of like waiting for your tax return. And you think, oh, I saved, $2,000, I'm getting this tax refund. And although you can certainly do it, it might be better to budget, more concretely over the year so that you don't have to wait and hope for a windfall. So we really don't want to wait and hope for a windfall. Advanced refunding is a really, in the research that I did after our meeting, is a very standard, well-received, and well-respected way that a municipality can adjust its debt load. It shows that we are, it's kind of like having a credit card. If you have children who don't have a credit card, I don't want a credit card. I know you don't, but this is a way that you demonstrate your credit worthiness. And so you need to, you need to do this thing. The advanced refunding, I think, will reflect well on us, will not interfere with our Moody's rating. And so it really seems like a sensible, everyday best practice for us as we move forward. So I'm hoping that all makes sense, and that as we go forward, I think we'll get better at this. Other comments, questions? Hearing none, our next meeting is March 8th. In our regular course of business and looking at the agenda from last council meeting, it looks like we will have a fair amount of business, so I hope to see you all on March 8th. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And could I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, we are adjourned. Again, thanks Todd for your assistance. Thank you, Carol, and away we go.
Thanks, everyone.